high intensity versus low intensity, and what the impacts are and what the amounts are and how you divide it up, and having good definitions for high and low. What does high intensity mean? What is low intensity? Because some people think high intensity is, doing some sort of extreme aerobic workout. So when I worked with Charlie Francis, he was always talking about developing some sort of universal field theory that governed everything. So if he talked about sprinting, training, in the nervous system, that related back to any discussion he had on electrical muscle stimulation. So you have sprinting, electrical muscle stimulation, you had max strength development. But they were all kind of governed by the same principles, whether it was the intensity of the use of these different things, the frequency of use, the frequency of the stimulation and how it related back to sprinting, anything to do with recovery and physical therapy. He wanted something that could encompass it all. And so this gets me thinking a lot about when I talk about sprinting, and it's not just about running fast. There's other things involved. So this was a quote that Charlie used a lot. I think he was referring to a swim coach that was talking to him about training, and when they observed what certain swimmers were doing, he said their fast is too slow, so they're not getting enough quality speed work in. It's probably bleeding down into the medium zone, and their slow is too fast, so they're not recovering. So everything is working towards this uncomfortable middle that's not creating positive results. So, and what we want to do is we want to spread people out the other way, because we're getting enough of this already. So why is there an attraction to medium level training? Well, let's call it the CrossFit effect, but people actually believe it is high just because the effect is making them tired or sore. They think it's a positive result, and it's not. It's just we've been taught, I think, as a society, that if you suffer, you'll gain something from it, and that's really not how it works. This whole mental toughness thing has become very prevalent. That again, if you suffer, that it's going to be positive, and you're going to be a better person for it, and that's not the case. So. I'm not saying that we're eliminating all suffering altogether, but people have to work hard. People have to do stress inoculation. I get it, but when all of your training is stuck in medium, it becomes a problem. Charlie Francis's speed zones and what actually happens in a game, I would say that a lot of the low speed, medium, and high speed that's classified in GPS actually turns out to be medium. So practice itself is exceptionally medium and low. I'm not discounting the fact that there's low intensity, but in terms of advancing people's physical abilities, I would say there's a lot of medium, and it's creating a lot of fatigue that accumulates throughout a season, a training camp, regular season, and in American football, NFL, college football. There is still a lot, a good amount of practice within the season, because people are trying to work things out, and hey, we didn't win the last game, we got to do something different this week, so let's work the guys harder, which I can see is being counterproductive, particularly when it comes to the health and safety of the athletes. So if we just look at practice, everything for the most part, I would say, is in the medium zone, maybe a little in the low, but practice is essentially medium. Nobody's getting better. Maybe tactically you're learning some things, but I think what needs to happen is, for people who are in the strength and conditioning field and the physical preparation field, is that you can't spend any time in medium. You cannot devote any of your training to medium because it's already being done. So you're either going to do a percentage of high and a percentage of low, and this is going to be just general fitness and recovery, and probably more recovery than anything. And this one doesn't go quite as far. And that's what we're trying to do with athletes, make them elastic, recognize that they have to produce vertical force, and just to maintain their forward momentum and reduce friction. Great. If we can do that. And, as far as hip height is concerned, if you have a high hip height, you're more like the inflated ball, less friction down here, the contact patch here. Whereas if your hip's low, you're like the flat ball, you're braking here in this spot, and then you're pushing out over here, and very long contact patch, longer time on the ground. So we want people to be like this when they run. I mean, there's other implications of running with a low hip in terms of agility and moving and braking and changing direction. But if we want to run fast, we want to be the inflated ball. I work with an athlete who ran 673 in a 60 meter, and all we did was most of our work was I would say 0 to 30 meters, because we were indoors, we were in a hallway or a confined space, and so all we worked on was acceleration. But then when we went outside and we worked on longer distances, so I would say we probably worked on 0 to 150 most days, but we also worked out to 250 meters. The interesting thing is that even though we spent more time here than on 0 to 30, like let's be honest, it was probably like most of our time was 60 to 150. So that's max velocity and speed endurance, SE, speed endurance here, where the ground contact times for the most part would be shorter, more elastic than the 0 to 30 work here. But guess what? His 60 time improved by doing more work here than it did on pure acceleration. So you have to think about this idea of vertical force production, reduce ground contact times, and how it can transfer to improve acceleration abilities as well. So all very interesting. So this gets us into this concept of speed reserve, which I use in team sports a lot. And the whole idea is that the higher your maximum speed capabilities, the greater ability to run sub-maximally at higher velocities for longer durations. So you have to be able to run fast, even to run slow for longer durations, or run at a higher speed at sub-maximal velocities for the duration of a game. So I use the Formula One example. I said, look, Formula One car has to go from 0 to 60 in 1.7 seconds in order to be effective, even though the race duration is 90 to 120 minutes, right? The car's engine has to have the horsepower to do this, right? So 750 horsepower in order to do this, but it has to be able to also do this as well. And on average, even though that's the max speed, because there's a lot of stop and go and braking and turning and all that, they need that horsepower and acceleration ability to have a relatively high average speed. And it's no different in team sports. I like these car analogies because it does apply.
Thanks for watching this highlight clip. If you want to watch this entire presentation, head over to strengthcoachnetwork.com, and for $1, you can try out the whole site for 24 hours, no strings attached, and get access to this presentation and hundreds more just like it.